Good afternoon. Welcome to this week's Drupal Chat. I'm Mark Isaacson, and I am your host each week. You can find me on Drupal.org at Vegan Triathlete. I guess I've been doing Drupal now for almost 7 years. When I look at my profile, it says that it's 6 years and 11 months. So that's a bit about me. I'm trying something a little bit new here today. I might be thrown off a little bit during this chat. I've actually opened up my tab with my Twitter account here, and I'm going to see if any of the anonymous viewers tweet at me and ask any questions. So I'm going to see how that goes today. Forgive me if I'm a little bit disoriented as I do the chat here, trying to figure out how to put these pieces together. Today, I'm going to be talking about, is the Drupal project a meritocracy? So I've attended a number of Drupal camps and Drupal conferences, and I've gotten to hear people mention the idea before about Drupal being a meritocracy, or Drupal being a do-it-ocracy. So before I start discussing whether that's really the case or not, I think it would be useful to make sure that everybody is on the same page about what exactly that means. So one thing to keep in mind is that, hi Solomon, hope you join us. One thing to keep in mind is that Drupal is, for the most part, an all-volunteer project. And there are some people who will be sponsored by companies to put time into it. So they may actually be getting paid to take part in their activities in the Drupal community. And there is the Drupal Association, and there are paid positions on the Drupal Association, but by and large, the Drupal project is all volunteer. So what we have happening is that people are scratching their own itch, is another term that you will hear people often say about how the Drupal project works. So Solomon's asking, the Drupal Association and Acquia backs Drupal, don't they? Well, the Drupal Association actually needs to get funding. So I don't know that I would say that the Drupal Association backs Drupal. I would say that the Drupal community backs the Drupal Association. The Drupal Association needs to get the funding through people in the community. Now, as far as whether Acquia backs Drupal, and we'll come into that, actually, I'll discuss that a little bit more in just shortly here when I raise the question about whether there are people who have undue influence and whether there are favorites in the community. But yes, Acquia is a company that was founded by Dries Buytaert, and Dries Buytaert is the person who is the creator of Drupal. So he's Acquia. Drupal, oh my goodness, Dries has got other companies that he started besides Acquia. Malam is another one of the companies that he's started as well. But Acquia is a services agency, which naturally uses Drupal to build websites for clients. And so, yes, Acquia does provide funding to Drupal. For instance, Acquia has got the, I think it was $500,000 maybe that Acquia had contributed to a fund to help modules get ported to Drupal 8. So, so yes, there is some money that is involved in the Drupal project, and some people do get to be paid some of that money. So like there were initiatives for some of the rework on Drupal.org where they put out a request for people to help them improve some things there. And then people did actually get to be paid to do the work on some of the changes to the infrastructure and the way that Drupal.org works. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself there, because I will come back to that and talk about that a little bit more, about how people do get the opportunity to actually be earning some money to do some things for the Drupal project and the Drupal website and the Drupal community. So let's get into it here a little bit. So what is a meritocracy, or the do-it-ocracy? The idea is that a person gains the status or reputation or ability and privileges to do things with Drupal, for Drupal, on behalf of Drupal, by earning it, by taking part in the community and stepping up and doing things to kind of make themselves known. And that's the merit and meritocracy, is that you earn the right to do things. So what might be one of those things that you would get to do once you have gained sufficient merit? So Drupal is a software product, and it needs to have code committed to that product. Well, not just anybody is able to act as a code committer to Drupal, for instance. So there are certain people that are called core committers to the Drupal project. And naturally, I think you could understand that getting that kind of a role is a pretty significant role to have. So those people who have actually gained the privileges to become core committers to the Drupal project have been able to demonstrate that they've contributed enough and taken part enough in the Drupal project. Another example of some privileges a person might get once they've established sufficient merit is that when you're on Drupal.org, there are different roles that people are assigned, and not all those roles are evident to people. And I myself haven't actually achieved all of those roles. So there are certain pages, for instance, in the documentation on Drupal that can be edited by anybody. Sign in, and you'll see a tab there that says edit, and you can edit that documentation page. And then there are other pages where you will not see that edit tab. So there are people who will have elevated privileges that will allow them to get at those pages and edit those pages. So that's an example of some things maybe specifically on Drupal.org and things that you can do there when you've got when you've earned sufficient merit. So that's the idea behind the merit and meritocracy and what you get out of it. The idea of the do-it-ocracy is more sort of just a restatement, or you maybe say a corollary of meritocracy. And what that means is that part of the way that you earn merit on Drupal is by getting your hands dirty and starting to do things. So what might a person be able to do if they haven't been granted the elevated privileges? Well, there's the issue queue for the Drupal core project, and people can still submit patches to fix things in Drupal core. Similarly, there's the contributed module base on Drupal, and once a person gains access to be a module maintainer, they can be contributing contributed modules, and they could be supporting those modules. It's also possible to submit patches to issue queues for contributed modules. So this is one way that a person could start engaging in the do-it of the do-it-ocracy. So as far as starting down this path, a few points that I would like to stress is that when you want to start elevating your reputation and your recognition in the Drupal project. And I'm not speaking as somebody who has extremely large presence on Drupal. I've got probably a teeny tiny presence. There are some people who know me, and certainly one of the things that I'm doing are these Drupal chats to contribute back to the community and to elevate my presence some. And so one of the things that I have done, and that I was even just doing recently, for example, is to contribute patches to contributed modules. And so I'm working on a project for a client right now, and they want to have a workflow in place. And I examined the different options, and I decided that the workflow module would be a good module for us to use relative to the other modules. I felt it was the best choice out of all of them. And the workflow module has its 2.x branch right now. And there's a new way that workflow is done where before it was called workflow node. And now they're recommending that you use workflow field. And there was a bug that was happening with workflow field. And so I invested quite a good number of hours. I think it actually, according to my timesheet, it ended up being about 9.1 hours that I invested to figure out how to address this bug. And so one would hope, I would certainly hope, that the maintainer of that module would have a great amount of appreciation for the time that I put in to address this bug. So when you want to start building up your merit in this meritocracy, in how you could start doing things, you might start participating in the issue queues. But one of the things that you want to keep in mind when you're doing this is that it's important to just get involved, be active, and don't be afraid about being messy about things. Don't worry about trying to have something perfect before you are willing to release anything for people. The community actually tends to like it a whole lot more when you get out there, you put yourself in front of people, and you let them see this whole messy process, which is exactly what I did when I was working on this patch. If you actually go to the issue that was open there, I really did extensive documenting of the things that I was looking at, the sections of code that I thought might be the problem, the ways that I was testing things like this. So you can feel free when you want to get involved in this whole meritocracy to jump right in and be messy about it, and don't be afraid of making mistakes, because in fact the community does tend to prefer that they see a person's out there and is active and doing things, as opposed to that if you're silent, nobody knows that you're doing anything. It's hard for them to recognize that you're participating and you're being active if you wait until you think you've got everything figured out, and then you just try to turn around and then you try to drop this big ta-da on people. And it's very much harder to get buy-in when you do that type of a thing, when you've been silent for this extended period of time, and then you've got this great innovation that you want everybody to jump on top of and support. And you say, here, take this, look at this great thing that I did. And then people they're taken back a little bit, and they say, well, who are you? Like, what is this thing that you're talking about? I don't have any idea what you're talking about. I don't have any idea who you are, and why should I bother taking a look at this right now? So that brings me into my next point about where some people can get a bit put off and a bit upset about this notion of the meritocracy and the do-it-ocracy, because they find sometimes that they will run into like obstacles and what they would categorize as resistance. They say, look, I have spent 6 months working on this great contributed module, and I can't get anybody to even grant me access to be a module maintainer on Drupal. I'm not being allowed to contribute my contributed module. And so people will they'll ask the question about, what is this thing about meritocracy and do-it-ocracy? Like, I'm trying to do it and I can't. People won't grant me the permissions. And the issue that people have really run into in that situation is not so much that the Drupal community isn't a meritocracy or a do-it-ocracy. It's that the person wasn't willing to be in there and kind of give a heads up and be involved actively and be messy so that people could start to have that chance to see, hey, there's somebody new here. Let me get a chance to know this person. If we look at the example of the contributed module that you wanted to give to the community, if you had some things like if you built a sandbox and you started asking for input from people, it's say, hey, I've got this idea that I'm working on, and you actually work to bring some more people into the process, you could actually get some backers, some supporters, some people who could help give you ideas about, well, did you consider doing this? Did you consider doing that? And you can get that input all along the way, where you could start kind of building your base and your audience. And things will go much better for you because you'll have more ideas that you can use. You can go about doing things better so when you actually do get the opportunity to submit your code for review, that you haven't made some grievous mistakes. Now, that's another thing that happens to people sometimes is that they'll hold back submitting anything. They put in a whole lot of effort, and then they get the code review where they get comments from people that they'll tell them, this is totally wrong. You're hacking this, or you're not using this API, or whatever it is that comes in the form of criticism. And then people will get upset. They'll feel like, oh my gosh, they're treating me like I'm completely worthless. They're so mean to me. They're so hard on me. This isn't fair. Like, I put in all this time. And again, the real issue is not that anybody's trying to be overly critical or unfair with you. It's that you drop this whole bomb on them instead of giving people a chance to see things early on and help mentor you through that process, so that you didn't put in 6 months worth of work before you let anybody look at anything. So just to drill these points about how to really work the meritocracy and do-it-ocracy is to get involved right away, to be active and be willing to be messy. Let people help you through this process. Let people get that chance to know you, and then things will go much more smoothly for you. So I've talked a lot right now in terms of submitting patches, for instance, or submitting, contributing a module to Drupal. And so this is another point where many people can get a bit up in arms and a bit concerned about this notion of Drupal's meritocracy and do-it-ocracy, because they'll say, yeah, Drupal is great if you're a total coding god, but if you don't know how to code, well, then too bad, so sad, we don't really care about you because you're a loser and you don't count if you can't code anyway. And in fact, that's not at all the truth, because there are other ways that a person can get involved in this do-it-ocracy. So one of the things that I did mention already was the documentation. This is Drupal, as I said, this is all volunteer. We don't have any official technical writers that are producing documentation for the project. And so while you may not be a coder, if you are using the product, then you have the opportunity, particularly when you are new. When you're a new user, it's a great time to get involved with the documentation, because you are at that point that you are seeing the things that don't make any sense in the documentation, or the things that haven't been documented at all. And so you've got this great opportunity to fill in the holes and to clarify things so that the other people who come behind you will have that documentation in place. So you don't have to be a code monkey to be able to help. Just using the Drupal product, particularly when you're a newbie. You don't have to be experienced and be some kind of a wizard and look up to some of the, icons in the Drupal community and say, oh my gosh, I could never be like this person or that person. There's actually a lot of benefit that you can bring as a totally new person. And so head into the documentation and see what you can do to help update the documentation. So speaking about the documentation, A way to participate in the documentation is to do exactly what I've said with get active, get involved, be active, and be messy. Don't be afraid to update the page. You don't have to leave a comment at the bottom of the page saying, oh, gee, I think I noticed that there was something wrong in here. Feel free to go into the documentation and to update it. Maybe you'll make a mistake. Maybe you'll state something that's not true. That's okay. It's not the end of the world. There's a revision system in place there. People can revert the documentation to the way it was before. People could come in and they can correct the things that that you put in there. But you're so much better off to update the actual documentation instead of leaving a comment at the bottom of the page on a documentation page. Another way that you can get involved is to look in the forums. There are so many forums that you can have a look at. There's the installation and post-installation and all this different kind of stuff where people are asking questions in the forums. And so jump in the forums and share some of your experience with other people who are asking questions in the forums. A couple of other ways that you can also get involved with the Drupal project and the Drupal community is to, well, first of all, you can attend like a meetup. There are meetups for, Drupal pretty much all around the world. I happen to live in Colorado, and in Colorado alone, I don't know if there are 4 or 5 meetup groups now in various parts of the state, the central and the northern and the southern and the western and the so I believe there's at least 4 meetups right now in Colorado for Drupal. So you could start going to these meetup events and getting to know people, ask your questions, answer questions, start doing some face-to-face networking with people. Many areas have camps that they host. Like we've got Drupal Camp Colorado, and there's the Bay Area Drupal Camp, and I think there was actually just a Drupal Camp in Florida recently. So you can attend a Drupal camp. Or coming up not too long from now in New Orleans is the North American Drupal Conference. So go to a Drupal conference. But you can do more than just attend these camps or conferences. With a camp, you could actually help with the organization of the camp. Maybe helping with the organization of a conference is a pretty big thing to do if you're just first getting involved, but there are ways that you can actually help at the conference to, even things as simple as like the registration, like a registration table and things like that. So you can get involved just on a personal level that way, where you're not having to update documentation or write any code, but you're actually showing up in person and doing things. Now, I would like to come back to the issue queues, because I don't want to just completely write off the issue queues if you aren't somebody who's got coding ability, because something else that you can do in the issue queues is that you can verify that you too are having a problem. When you see that there's an issue posted against a project, whether it's the Drupal project or one of the contributed modules, you can jump into that issue queue and say, ah, yes, I can say that I am also having this same issue. And some of the things that you may find will be very helpful for you to do in the issue queue is to document the steps that you took to reproduce that problem. Because sometimes people will just open up an issue and they will say, such and such is not working, but they won't give any information about like what does their setup look like and what steps did they take to make this issue happen. So you could jump in there and you can update that issue. You could put a comment on the issue to just clarify that and say, I'm having the same problem, and these are the steps that you can take to reproduce the problem. Alternatively, when there's a patch proposed in the issue queue, again, you don't have to be a code monkey. You don't have to necessarily review the patch and give feedback from a technical perspective. But you can apply the patch and say whether the patch actually fixes your problem or not, because then you can be part of the process where they put that patch into RTBC, which you could think of it as standing by reviewed and tested by the community, or like if it's RBTC, it would be reviewed by the community. But the way that you're supposed to say it is RTBC, reviewed and tested by the community. So that's something that you can do to contribute. So if you take advantage of these different ways of getting involved, getting some of your credibility and the respect for taking part in the Drupal community, that can open up some opportunities for you. And again, I'm going to come back now a little bit to more like the Code Monkey techie type of thing, because as I mentioned, so for instance, Acquia had their $500,000 grant that they put up for people to port Drupal 7 modules to Drupal 8. And so there were people who could actually get paid to port these modules. And at times people can get this perception that there are these favorites because, oh, look, how come this person got to earn money and I'm supposed to give my time for free on the Drupal project to do these things? And I would say the answer is that the people who are getting paid to work on the project gave a significant amount of their time for free already as well to demonstrate their expertise and their willingness to contribute to the Drupal community. So that's why, you know, some people will actually get some of this grant money and will get paid to do things because they have already previously demonstrated their commitment to Drupal and their skills, their ability to help out with Drupal. Now, one last thing that I'll kind of start wrapping up this discussion with here, just so that I don't continue to bang on the same old drum for the whole chat here incessantly, is about how decisions are made in the Drupal community. Because at times people will have the concern, just to go back to Salman's question here, and I'm not saying that Salman was necessarily knocking on Acquia when he asked about whether Acquia backs Drupal, but there are people who will have a concern at times that, well, Acquia decides what Drupal is going to look like. And so I'll give a couple of my thoughts on that type of complaint. So the first thought, just to keep it in line with this whole idea of the meritocracy, is that, well, the people who end up making the decisions about the direction of Drupal and how things go are the people who are involved in it. And so naturally, the people who are more involved are going to have more say on what direction Drupal goes. And so when you look at an organization like Acquia, there's a lot of people working for Acquia who have a lot of involvement in the Drupal project, product, and community. And so, so naturally, they're going to tend to have more say. And similarly, when you look at people, let's say, I was going to say Larry Krell, his Drupal nick is Krell. It's Larry Garfield. When you look at somebody like Larry Garfield, who's been extremely involved in the Drupal project and product and community, he just also has a lot of institutional knowledge. So not only has he established his credentials, but he's also built up that knowledge to be able to talk intelligently about where Drupal's been and where he thinks it should go. Let me give you an example of getting involved in the direction of Drupal. So Angie Byron had posted, this is quite some time ago, I forget, she called it like a meta something thread about Drupal and the fact that when they did their user testing, that there were people who just didn't even understand the idea that Drupal could be extended. They didn't know what extending Drupal was. They didn't know what a module was, any of that kind of stuff. And at any rate, this thread turned into this issue that she had posted. It generated hundreds and hundreds of comments. But at some point during that comment thread, that comment stream, I participated on a number of occasions through my ideas and about my experience with Drupal 6 and some things that were different between Drupal 6 and Drupal 7. And one of the things that I like better about Drupal 6, and to kind of boil things down here into a TLDR, at one point, I threw out the idea of there like, hey, wow, what if we had like some type of a module that could be enabled that would give people some of this information again. And I came up with this idea of calling it tour, T-O-U-R, tour.module. And so I tossed it out there. And lo and behold, it was an idea that other people did latch onto. And if you look at Drupal 8 now, you will see we have exactly that. We've got tour.module. And the way they develop it was way beyond the wildest imagination of what I would have ever thought of doing. It's really cool the way that they've added this. They added like a little framework that you can create your own tours, even with your contributor modules that you create. So there's an example of something where there was discussion around this. I got involved in the discussion, and it's an idea that did catch hold and now is a part of Drupal 8. So there definitely is the opportunity for people to influence where Drupal goes in the future. Another example that we can look at is with Drupal 8, and I was not involved in this, but the fact that Drupal 8 is now using Twig and how the theme layer has been reworked. There are many people who have really upped their involvement in the Drupal community strictly on the basis of the fact that they were so passionate about getting Drupal to use Twig and then again, do-it-ocracy, doing all of these things to test and show that we weren't going to have the performance hits when we switched to Twig. And I mean, they just jumped on, they got involved, and now they're people who have positions of greater status and greater privileges within the Drupal community. And so I mentioned there was a couple of points that I was going to bring up. So this was all tying into the meritocracy. The other side of the coin here is that when you look at organizations like Acquia, for instance, it does take money to continue to move the product forward. There is a huge infrastructure that needs to be in place to support Drupal.org. And so the people who are going to be contributing the money to make this happen naturally are going to have their opinions and preferences about where Drupal should be heading. Because where do you think they get their money from? They get their money from doing Drupal. And if Drupal doesn't go in the right direction, they're not going to continue to be able to make their money, and they're not going to have the money to give to the project. So, and I don't think that's something that is so unfair, because I think it still ties into the whole notion of the scratching your own itch and putting your resources, investing in the project and the product, investing in the community. And so I hope that gives people a good sense of this whole idea of the meritocracy and the do-it-ocracy aspect of Drupal. And I hope that it gives people some encouragement to actually get involved and to experience it for themselves. Because I will close up this little chat, this monologue, as it turns out here, with my opinion that Drupal truly is meritocracy. And if you do want to get involved, you can get involved, and you can pretty much make your own way to achieve whatever level it is that you want, whatever privileges, whatever recognition, whatever status you'd like to achieve in the community. It's possible for you to do this just by jumping in and getting involved. If you have other thoughts on this matter, or perhaps you're catching the replay later on, but you'd like a way to leave your comments, you will be able to find the replay on teachyourselfdrupal.org. I've placed the link in the chat window here, so you can go ahead and you can continue the conversation there if you so choose. I've got Discuss installed on the site, so you are welcome to leave your comments. I'll make sure that I get back to you. So that's it for this week. I thank you for those of you who were with me live. Thank you for sharing a couple of your comments there, Salman. And for those of you who are watching the replay in the future, I thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to taking part with you in the future on upcoming Drupal chats. Ta-ta for now.